Welcome to my channel. I hope today's story will be something you truly enjoy. Please support me even more. Now, let's begin the story.
My younger brother Riley ruined my life by posting on our family group chat. She's just a party girl working nights at the bar, going home with random guys living wild. Mom and Dad instantly reacted with angry emojis and told me to pack my bags and get out. Years later at my engagement party, my dad messaged me and wrote, "Here's how it all started. I'm Ava. I grew up in a regular middle-class family in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Dad was an engineer, Mom was a nurse, and my little brother Riley was always the golden child, 2 years younger. Good grades, basketball team, the one they bragged about to everyone. Me, I was just trying to figure things out. I'd been working late shifts at a local bar to save for college, because tips were decent and it fit around my schedule. Dad and Mom had always been pretty conservative. They hated the idea of bars and late nights. Riley had been dropping hints for months about how worried he was for me saying stuff like I was changing and hanging with the wrong crowd. Then one night I came home from a shift and my phone was blowing up. Riley had posted a long message in the family group chat saying he couldn't keep quiet anymore. He claimed I was partying every night, sleeping around with customers, bringing strangers home, basically painting me as completely out of control. Mom reacted with broken heart emojis and wrote how disappointed she was. Dad jumped in saying they couldn't enable this behavior anymore and that I had to leave. Just like that. No questions, no chance to explain. They believed every word from Riley without hesitation. I sat there staring at the screen thinking this had to be some kind of sick joke, but it wasn't. If you want to know how I rebuilt my life from nothing and what happened when they suddenly wanted back in years later, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into the full story. Let me back up a little and tell you what life was like in our house in Albuquerque before it all fell apart. We lived in a typical middle-class neighborhood on the edge of the city, the kind with adobe-style houses, dry desert air, and views of the Sandia Mountains in the distance. Dad worked as a civil engineer for a local construction firm, long hours but steady payable benefits, and a pension he was always talking about. Mom was a nurse at one of the bigger hospitals downtown, usually on day shifts, but sometimes picking up evenings when they were short-staffed. They were decent parents in a lot of ways, the type who made sure we had food on the table, clothes that fit, and got us to school on time. Holidays were big. Mom loved cooking green chile stew and tamales at Christmas, and Dad grilled steaks in the backyard every 4th of July. Riley came along 2 years after me, and from the start, he was the one everyone noticed. He had this easy charm even as a kid, blonde hair that never looked messy, quick smile, and he figured out early how to work a room. Teachers loved him, coaches put him on starting lineups for basketball by middle school, and our parents beamed whenever someone mentioned his name. I wasn't jealous exactly, I just accepted it. I was quieter, preferred staying in my room reading or listening to music, and my grades were solid but never straight A's like his. I played volleyball for a couple seasons in high school, but I quit when the practices cut into my part-time job hours. Looking back, the favoritism was there in small ways that added up. One time when Riley was 16, he borrowed my old bike without asking and ended up scraping it pretty bad against the garage wall trying some stupid trick. I came home and saw the damage, got upset, because I'd saved up for that bike myself. When I told Mom and Dad, they barely looked at the scratches before saying I shouldn't have left it lying around where anyone could grab it. Riley got a mild "be more careful next time," and that was it. I remember standing there feeling like I was the one who did something wrong for making a fuss. Another thing that stuck with me happened right around when I started picking up evening shifts. I'd been working days at a little coffee shop near campus, but the money wasn't cutting it for tuition and books. So I applied at a bar and grill downtown, where tips were way better. The first night I came home after midnight, Mom was waiting up in the kitchen. She didn't yell, but she gave me this look and said, Good girls didn't come home at those hours that people would talk, and what would the neighbors think if they saw my car pulling in late? Meanwhile, Riley was 17 at the time and stayed up until 2 or 3 some nights gaming online with his friends, volume blasting through his headphones. Dad would just walk by his door, chuckle, and call him responsible for knowing his limits. I never pointed out the double standard out loud. It felt pointless. We weren't a fighting family. Riley and I didn't argue much because we didn't interact that deeply. He had his circle of popular kids' team practices parties on weekends that our parents actually encouraged because he's earning it with his grades. I had a smaller group of friends, mostly from work or classes, and I spent a lot of time saving every dollar I could. I figured once I finished community college and transferred to a 4-year school, I'd be out on my own anyway, so I kept my head down. By the time I turned 21, I was juggling full-time classes and as many bar shifts as I could get. The place wasn't some wild club. It was a neighborhood spot with regulars who came for burgers, beers, and the occasional live band on Fridays. I liked the crew I worked with. The tips helped me build a small savings account, and I felt like I was finally moving towards something real. Dad and Mom weren't thrilled about the late hours, but they didn't forbid it outright. Riley, though, started making little comments whenever I walked in tired, stuff like rough night with this smirk, or telling Mom I smelled like smoke when it was just from the patio heaters. I brushed it off as typical little brother teasing. Life felt stable enough. I had no idea how quickly that could change. One night, after finishing a late shift at the bar, I got home around 2 in the morning and my phone was exploding with notifications. I figured it was just friends texting about weekend plans or something from work. But when I opened the family group chat, my stomach dropped. Riley had posted a long message at the top time-stamped about an hour earlier. He started with, "I can't keep quiet anymore." Then he went on about how he'd been holding this in for too long because he didn't want to hurt anyone, but he couldn't watch me throw my life away. He claimed I was out every night partying with customers, drinking on the job, and going home with random guys from the bar. He said it wasn't just hearsay, that last month he'd driven by after a game and saw me leave with some older guy after closing, getting into his car like it was nothing. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. That specific night he mentioned, I remembered it clearly. I'd pulled a double shift because another server called out sick, stayed until cleanup was done alone, and drove myself home in my own car. No one else, no guy, nothing. It was a complete fabrication. Before I could even type a response, Mom reacted with a string of broken heart emojis and wrote, "This breaks my heart." I knew something was off. Dad jumped in right after with angry face reactions and a message saying, "We've suspected for a while. This lifestyle isn't what we raised you for." Then Riley added another text, "I've tried talking to her, but she just denies everything. I'm worried she's in too deep." I started typing frantically, explaining that none of it was true, that I was just working hard for tips, that the night he mentioned I'd been alone closing up. But every time I hit send, it felt like shouting into a void. Mom replied with denial is part of the problem, and Dad wrote, "We can't have this under our roof anymore. You need to find somewhere else to stay." Riley stayed quiet after his follow-up, letting the messages sit there like evidence. I asked him directly why he was saying these things, what proof he had besides one made-up night. He didn't answer. Instead, Dad sent a final text. "You have 1 week to pack your things and figure out a new place. We love you, but we won't enable this." I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, phone glowing, rereading everything. It didn't feel real. I tried calling Mom. No pickup. Texted Dad separately, asking if we could talk in person tomorrow. He responded with, "We need space right now to process this as a family." Riley's read receipts showed he saw my messages to him, but nothing back. The next morning, I got up early, hoping to catch them before work. Dad was in the kitchen drinking coffee, Mom getting ready in the bathroom. I walked in and asked if we could sit down for 5 minutes. Dad looked up, face tight, and said it wasn't the time, that Riley had already left for class, and they stood by what was said last night. Mom came out, avoided eye contact, and told me she had an early shift at the hospital. When I pushed, saying this was all based on lies, Dad cut me off. Riley wouldn't make something like this up. He's been torn up about it. I asked to see whatever proof Riley had besides his word. Dad shook his head and said the details were enough that my late hours and coming home smelling like a bar had been red flags for months. Mom added quietly that she'd prayed I'd change, but this was the last straw. Riley wasn't even there to face me. Over the next few days, the house felt like a stranger's. They'd leave rooms when I entered, conversations stopped when I walked by. I kept my shifts at the bar because I needed the money more than ever now. Every night coming home, I'd hope for a real talk, but it never happened. Riley stayed in his room or out with friends, acting like everything was normal on his end. I spent those days quietly packing, clothes into duffels, books, and laptop into boxes, a few personal things I couldn't leave behind. I didn't argue anymore. It felt exhausting and pointless. By the end of the week, my car was loaded with everything that mattered. A week later, I was out of the house and sleeping on my friend Marley's couch in a small apartment across town. The first night on Marley's couch wasn't about crying. It was about figuring out how to survive. Marley had been a coworker at the bar for over a year, someone I trusted enough to call when everything blew up. She didn't ask a ton of questions, just said the couch was mine as long as I needed and handed me a spare key the next day. Her place was tiny, one bedroom she kept for herself, a combined living room and kitchen, with barely enough space for the pull-out sofa that served as my bed. It was old, sagged in the middle, and made my back ache every morning, but I was grateful. I made it a rule to keep my stuff-contained clothes in one duffel, toiletries in a small bag, everything stacked neatly in the corner so I didn't take over her space. I threw myself into work harder than ever. The bar schedule became my anchor. I volunteered for every open shift, even doubles when possible, smiling through tired eyes to get the better sections with higher tips. At the end of each night, I'd sit in the break room counting cash, 5s and 10s, mostly sometimes 20s from generous groups, separating what I needed for immediate bills and tucking the rest away for future rent. Food budgets got tight quick. Breakfast was usually dry cereal from the discount bin or toast, with whatever spread was on sale. Lunch was packed from home, a sandwich or leftovers if I had any. Dinners were hit or miss. Some nights I'd grab a cheap burrito from a food truck near the bar, others I'd just head straight to the apartment and crash. About a month in, the reality of full independence hit with the phone bill. It arrived in my email, the full amount this time, no more family plan discount. I logged into the account, transferred money from my checking, and paid it without hesitation. Watching the confirmation pop up gave me a rush pride mixed with a knot in my stomach, knowing there was no safety net if something went wrong. A week later, I wheeled a cart through the grocery store aisles alone for the first big shop. I stuck to the basics: bags of rice, cans of beans, eggs, by the dozen, day-old bread from the clearance rack. No snacks, no soda, nothing unnecessary. At checkout, I loaded the conveyor belt, watched the total climb slower than I feared, and swiped my card with funds I'd earned tip by tip. Carrying the bags up to Marley's apartment felt like proof I could handle this. There were close calls where doubt crept in strong. One rainy evening after closing, body exhausted from being on my feet. 12 hours, I parked outside the building and scrolled to Mom's number. The screen lit up her photo from years back, smiling at some family barbecue. My finger lingered, ready to dial and spill everything: how hard it was, how much I missed normalcy, even offer an apology just to bridge the gap, though deep down I knew I'd done nothing to deserve the fallout. I pictured her answering voice, soft, maybe saying, "Come home." But reality snapped back the unread messages, the cold dismissal. I turned off the screen, grabbed my bag, and headed upstairs. Reaching out would only reopen wounds on their terms. I chose to keep building on my own. Marley made it easier without trying. Her retail job meant she left early and got home around 6, while I often didn't finish until after midnight. We'd cross paths sometimes in the morning. She'd brew coffee for both, Ask how the night went, then head out. I'd tidy up immediately, fold the sofa bed, vacuum crumbs, if any, restock the toilet paper I used. As soon as I had extra, I contributed to groceries or slipped money toward the electric bill. She waved it off at first, but I insisted. Fairness mattered. Staying invisible as possible drove me to excel at the bar, learning drink recipes faster, handling rowdy tables, smoothly earning nods from managers for reliability. Rumors filtered in slowly. A few customers who recognized me from high school events shifted uncomfortably when I approached or requested different servers. One longtime regular tipped half what he usually did, eyes averted. An old friend from classes texted out of the blue, "Heard you moved out, everything okay?" I replied vaguely, "Just needed space," and left it there. No explanations owed. Keeping forward momentum meant planning beyond daily grind. I researched affordable education options during slow afternoons on break, laptop balanced on my knees. Online courses from the local community college caught my eye, flexible credit-bearing, no campus commute. One quiet night after covering another utility payment solo, I opened the portal, completed the enrollment forms, selected introductory business and accounting classes that fit irregular hours. Submitting the registration locked in a new goal, something tangible amid uncertainty. About 10 months into this new life, I overheard something that changed how I saw everything. It didn't happen in one big moment. The pieces came slowly over several months from unrelated conversations that suddenly connected. I'd stayed at the bar while building credits through those classes, showing up reliable every shift. The owners appreciated it. They saw me handling inventory, training new servers, stepping up during rushes without being asked. After roughly a year as a regular server, they offered me shift supervisor. The role meant higher hourly pay, managing openings and closings, dealing with customer complaints, directly creating weekly schedules. It required trust, and earning it felt validating. I held that position for about a year, gaining real management experience, balancing cash drawers, accurately mediating staff conflicts, ordering supplies to keep costs down. Those skills built a stronger resume. When a logistics firm downtown posted an administrative coordinator job handling shipments, vendor communication, office organization, I applied on a whim. The process dragged: online application, phone screen, 2 in-person interviews, over 3 weeks, reference checks. Getting the offer email was a turning point: full-time salary, benefits package, Monday through Friday hours. Starting there shifted everything. No more closing at 2 a.m. No more smoky clothes. The office environment was structured: cubicles, team meetings, shared coffee pot in the break room. Colleagues were friendly enough, focused on work without much after-hours socializing. One day during lunch, Ian from accounting sat across from me. We'd exchanged small talk before complaints about printers jamming or weekend weather. This time, the conversation turned to high schools in the area. When I mentioned mine, he lit up. "Wait, your last name? Any relation to Riley?" I nodded cautiously. Ian said he'd been in a few classes with him, remembered Riley as outgoing but prone to exaggerating stories for laughs. Like claiming victories in pickup games that never happened, or spreading gossip about classmates that later proved untrue. People drifted away eventually, Ian added, because the drama got old. He said it casually, no malice, just recollection. It wasn't proof of anything specific, but it planted a seed. A few weeks after that, I stopped by the old bar to catch up with former coworkers. A longtime regular, an older guy who'd always tipped, waved me over. After asking how the new job was going, he lowered his voice. "Your brother used to drop in here once in a while, you know. Not to drink much, just sit at the end, watch the room, ask odd questions about schedules, then leave." He shrugged like it hadn't meant much at the time. Another unrelated comment, but it fit with the pattern emerging. Those fragments didn't obsess me. They simply reframed old questions. Instead of replaying what I could have done differently, I channeled energy into the present. The coordinator role grew on me, tracking deliveries across states, negotiating with suppliers for better rates, implementing a new filing system that saved hours weekly. Recognition came in small ways: boss mentioning my reports in meetings, teammates relying on me for updates. Jude showed up through work. His delivery company handled our larger shipments, so he came by the warehouse dock regularly. First interactions were professional signing manifests, confirming package counts. Gradually, chats extended jokes about Albuquerque traffic on Central Avenue, recommendations for food trucks nearby. He had an easy, understated way about him noticing details like bringing extra pens when ours ran dry. We built friendship over several months' group lunches when his route-aligned texts about funny client stories grabbing takeout after a long day. Only then did it turn romantic. He asked if I'd like to try a real dinner, just us. Dates started simple local breweries with patios, hikes up the foothills on weekends, drive-in movies during summer. He listened when I shared bits of my background, never pressing for more, responding with quiet support. Introducing him to his family unfolded naturally. Alan and Sharon hosted casual backyard gatherings, often grilling chicken with green chili cold drinks under string lights. The first time Jude brought me, Sharon hugged hello, like we'd met before. Asked about my favorite sides, made sure I had seconds. Alan talked shop about logistics trends, offered stories from his military days without dominating. Reese arrived later, grease on his hands from the shop, cracked jokes about Jude's terrible taste in music, pulled me into debates about best hiking trails around the city. Invites kept coming. Weeknight dinners when schedules matched game nights with cards and board setups, holiday cookouts, where Sharon taught family recipes. They included me in traditions, 4th of July fireworks from their Hillview Thanksgiving with extended cousins. Reese dragged us to local car shows or basketball pickup games. Alan fixed a rattle in my car without charging just because. Sharon sent care packages during busy work weeks, homemade enchiladas or cookies. Their acceptance built steadily, no grand declarations, just reliable warmth that filled gaps I'd carried for years. With Jude, things deepened organically. We supported each other through promotions and setbacks, planned small trips to Santa Fe or the mountains, talked future without pressure. Having his family as extension provided stability I hadn't known possible. 6 years had gone by. I was 27, doing well in my job, and happier than I'd ever thought possible. Jude and I had been together long enough to talk serious future. He proposed one evening on a hike in the foothills, simple ring sunset behind the mountains, no big production. I said yes, without hesitation. We started planning a small engagement party backyard at Alan and Sharon's close friend's local caterer for New Mexican food, nothing extravagant. Invites went out to about 40 people, co-workers, Jude's extended family, a few old friends who'd stuck around. Then the messages started. It began with a friend request on Facebook from Dad. His profile picture was him and Mom on some cruise, looking tanned and older. I let it sit unread for days, unsure. Curiosity won. I accepted. Nothing immediate happened. A week later, a message popped up, long paragraph starting with "Hi sweetheart," like no time had passed. He wrote they'd been thinking about me a lot lately, that Riley had moved out and was doing his own thing, and they'd reflected on how harsh things got years ago. He said maybe they overreacted, that family should stick together, and he'd heard through mutual acquaintances I was engaged. Congratulations. Ended with hoping we could grab coffee sometime, catch up. I read it multiple times, feeling a twist in my gut. No direct apology, just harsh and overreacted. I showed Jude that night. He read quietly, handed the phone back, said it was my call, but the timing felt off. 6 years silent. Then engagement news surfaces and suddenly reflection. Mom messaged a few days later, similar tone. Lots of "we miss you" and "life's too short," mentioning how proud they were, hearing I'd built a career. She added they'd love to meet Jude, that it would mean the world to celebrate this milestone together. Riley's message came separately, shorter. Hey, congrats on the engagement. Things were complicated back then. I was dealing with my own stuff and didn't handle it well. Hope you're happy. No mention of lies, no owning the specific damage, just vague, complicated, and didn't handle well. The requests escalated. Dad followed up asking about party details, saying they didn't want to miss out on big moments like this. Mom sent another noting how nice it would be for family photos that neighbors still asked about me. Riley texted suggesting a group call to clear air before the event. The subtext grew clear. They wanted invitations presence at the celebration re-entry on their terms, now that things looked good from outside. I wrestled with it hard. Part of me wondered if people change, if time softened edges. Another part remembered the absolute cutoff, no check-ins during hardest months. I talked it through with Jude over dinner one night. He listened, then said gently, they'd had years to reach out when I was struggling, not just when success showed. Sharon overheard part of the conversation later at their house. She pulled me aside, said, whatever I decided she supported, but protect the peace I'd earned. Alan weighed in during a weekend visit, practical, as always parents make mistakes. But timing here raised flags, suddenly interested when there's a party and potential grandkids downline. Reese joked they probably wanted free food, but seriously added I owed them nothing. The more messages came, the clearer the pattern. No deep accountability, just desire to be included again. Avoid explaining absence to relatives, slide back, like nothing major happened. I drafted replies, deleted them, talked more with Jude. We agreed boundaries mattered. The party was for people who'd been there consistently. The evening of our engagement party arrived intimate, warm, surrounded by people who truly had my back. Alan and Sharon's backyard looked perfect under string lights, tables set with blue and orange linens nodding to New Mexico colors. The caterer laid out trays of enchiladas, carne adobada, calabachitas, and stacks of sopapillas for dessert. A local band played low-key acoustic covers, volume just right for conversation. Guests mingled Jude's cousins, my co-workers, including Ian, a handful of friends who'd known me since community college days. Reese manned the grill, flipping burgers as backup, cracking jokes with everyone. Sharon circulated, making sure plates stayed full. Alan poured drinks and told stories that had people laughing. Jude and I moved through the crowd hand in hand, accepting hugs and toasts. Someone handed us margaritas in salt-rimmed glasses. We clinked with Reese and a group near the fire pit. The air smelled of chile and mesquite smoke. Mountain breeze cooling as sun dipped. Moments like that made the years of scraping by feel distant. About halfway through, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped aside to check, thinking maybe a late RSVP. It was a long message from Dad sent maybe an hour earlier. He started with seeing photos friends had posted online, me in the dress I'd chosen, Jude and I smiling by the lights. Said I looked beautiful, that they were proud, watching from afar how I'd turned out. Then shifted after a lot of family talks. Riley finally admitted he'd exaggerated things back then to get attention during a rough patch in his own life. Dad wrote they'd been too quick to take his side without hearing mine fully, that it was a mistake they regretted. He hoped I could understand parents aren't perfect, and now with this new chapter they didn't want to miss being part of it. Especially down the road when grandkids might come, they wanted to be the grandparents they should have been from the start. Ended with love from him and Mom. Please consider letting them make amends. I stood there reading under the glow of a patio bulb, pulse rising. Exaggerated, rough patch, mistake. No ownership of the years lost, just framing it as understandable parenting error, then jumping to future benefits like access to hypothetical children. The entitlement hit hard. Jude noticed me frozen and came over. I handed him the phone without a word. He read, face tightening slightly, gave it back, and wrapped an arm around my waist. Your decision, he said, quiet, but that's a lot of words to say. Very little accountability. I slipped away to a quieter corner, typed a reply while guests laughed in background. Kept it short, thanked for the message, noted. Riley's admission must have been tough to hear. said after 6 years building a life that works for me, surrounded by support that showed up consistently, adding complication, now didn't feel right. Wish them well, asked to respect the boundary. Hit send blocked both numbers, then Riley's for good measure. Phone back in pocket, weight lifted. The rest of the night flowed easy. Toasts from Reese poking fun at Jude's dancing, Sharon tearing up, talking about gaining a daughter, Ian raising a glass to office wins. We cut a small cake, danced slow under stars, ended with fireworks. Alan set off legally from the driveway. Driving home with Jude windows down, I felt settled, no second guessing. Months later, bits of news filtered through distant connections. Riley had landed a management spot at a retail chain, but word got around about past exaggerations. A co-worker confrontation led to trust issues with upper staff, and he was let go. He moved jobs again, lower profile. Mom and Dad scaled back community stuff. They used to be regulars at Sunday services and neighborhood potlucks, but attendance dropped. Mutual acquaintances mentioned they seemed uncomfortable when old neighbors brought up family questions hanging unspoken. I didn't seek those updates. They just arrived, occasional neutral reports. No satisfaction taken, just observation of natural fallout. Looking back now, the real takeaway isn't bitterness. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who chooses to stay when life gets hard and who celebrates with you when it gets good.